Hello and welcome. I just finished eating lunch. This is Rashim, the Be More Catalyst of Be More LLC, here to help you to do more, serve more, and be more. Today we have a special guest, Dr. William Clark, who is going to talk with us about nonprofit sustainability. Before I bring him on, or while I'm bringing him on, I encourage you, as I always do, to grab a sheet of paper. I got mine. Grab a pen, grab something to drink. I have a little Pepsi, Diet Pepsi. And get ready. For this time that you're sitting here, that you're here, I want you to decide that your nonprofit sustainability is the most important thing for the next 30 minutes. I want you to decide that this is worth giving your undivided attention to for this time and this moment. I want you to be an active learner, to take plenty of notes, ask plenty of questions. If you're listening to the replay, please feel free to also do the same thing. Get your water, get your paper, get your notes, because this is worth giving your time and attention to. As you know, or you wouldn't be giving your time and attention to it, right? So let me tell you a little bit about how I met Dr. William Clark as I'm bringing him on. I actually met him on another broadcast. It was on his show where he was interviewing someone else on his show around nonprofit development. And he mentioned a book that he had around nonprofit sustainability. And I was really interested in it. I wanted to more about it. And after I heard him speak, I heard a little bit more about his book. I went to his website, downloaded some of his information, and I was like, I have got to have him on the show. So I sent out an invite and he said, yes. So we have him here with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. William Clark.
Hey, Rashim, how are you?
Very well. So one of the things that I like to do is I'm so not into like the whole boring bio thing, but at the same time, I want to get to know you and I want everybody here to get to know you. So the thing that I'm really interested in is I always like to ask people, what is your Be More movement? And what that just means to us is, what is your being? Who would you say Dr. William Clark is at his core? What is his more? What is the transformation that he wants to make in the world? And what are the actions that you're committed to getting you from where you are to where you want to be? So what is your Be More movement?
Yeah, my Be More movement is to help nonprofits figure out how to keep their doors open and their lights on and their bills paid.
That's absolutely key, essential. And that's exactly why you're here, because your Be More movement aligns so much with my Be More movement. I'm sure everyone here that's listening or everyone listening to the replay could definitely understand and get down with something like that. Totally in alignment.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about how you come into even providing services for nonprofit. What got you interested? Why do you care if nonprofits keep their doors open?
Yeah, I don't think we really talked about this, and we might have, Rashim, but it comes from a painful place. So back in 2011, Hurricane Irene hit my home church back in Philadelphia. And when it hit, it was the third day of torrential storms and rains, and it actually put a hole on the side of the building. If I could show a picture on my iPad, I would, but just imagine that a building of any length, and right in the middle of it is this huge gaping hole where you can see clear through the church itself. So at that point, we wrestled with what to do next. A lot of people grew up in that church and had a lot of memories. People got married and were birthed into that church and died. And we were actually going to have a funeral that week in that church for a long-term member. So I had to make a shift from being fully active as an active minister to becoming more of an administrator of ministry, which I was dabbling in both quite frequently at that time, but I really had the shift towards becoming an administrator. And I realized a few things once that shift happened. One, the church, I already knew the church really wasn't growing as fast as it needed to grow to sustain. And so typically, like any other nonprofit, a church sustains in a traditional way by way of donations, right? So they receive donations, what we call offerings and tithes. And if a church isn't growing, then that means that the donations are trickling down, the tithes are going down, and it becomes even more difficult to sustain a church. And so I began to walk through that process of trying to figure out how to help my home church. I wasn't the senior pastor at the time, and I was looking to help my pastor as best as I could. And so I started researching ways to do that. And I tapped into a skill set that I already had, and that was buying and selling real estate. I understood how to do that as an investor. And then I began to think about how could that apply to a nonprofit organization such as my church. So besides helping them figure that out, I also simultaneously just started a doctoral program, and I began to write about strategic leadership. And so I started to combine both concepts, and it became an extreme passion of mine. So not only was I, performing doctoral research on it, writing articles and publishing, I was also practicing what I was writing about because my church needed it. And then other nonprofits needed it, and then started consulting. And that's how it became such an important area of interest for my Be More movement.
Fantastic. I love it. I think the thing that I love most about that, one, is because I feel like I know you better than if I would have read a bio. Because I don't know if I could get the church story from the bio, right? Or get the connections that are made, right? It's not just about, I always say people don't care what you know until they know that you care.
Yeah.
And that experience to me connects to me that you care. And it also tells me a little bit more about why you care. And I got a little bit more insight into the practical, the passion, the pragmatic, and how you were able to combine all of those toward being a do-gooder, right?
Yep.
So tell me about nonprofit sustainability. What exactly does that word mean anyway?
So it means exactly what it means, what it says. I think some people do think about sustainability from a perspective of how do we go green? And that's not where I focus my attention on. I think that's obviously important, helping our planet and figure out how to not waste. But the other understanding of sustainability that most people have is how do you keep the doors open? How do you keep the bills paid? How do you keep your overhead needs met? And that's how you sustain. So most nonprofits understand it by way of diversifying funding by having multiple funders invest into their program. So while you may pursue one large funder, in your region, you may pursue another large funder the next state over, and you may diversify by having a bunch of small funders pour into your nonprofit. And so that's the basic understanding of what sustainability means to a lot of nonprofit leaders, executive directors, board of directors, volunteers, etc. And while I don't discredit that or push away from that, I do take the term sustainability and I broaden the definition to mean being able to sustain through independent resources. So what people do not realize, and they may not realize until it's too late, is that when they take on funding from other sources, they are responsible not only for being good stewards of those resources, but they have a lot of restrictions that are placed upon those dollars, which means that while your doors may stay open, it is a strong possibility that you may experience mission creep, which means that the purpose that you originally created the nonprofit for can be violated or tampered with because the resources are pulling you away from that core mission. And so we talk about, with our training and our books, the importance of figuring out how to sustain your nonprofit through independent resources so that even if traditional funding is not available or goes away, you're able to still keep the doors open, the bills paid, staff paid, and you don't have to worry about losing focus on your mission.
Absolutely. No, that's so fantastic. And I love that how you expanded the definition from sustainable, because it doesn't just seem like it's just to keep the doors open. It's to keep the doors open so that we can be independently functioning as an organization. Mm-hmm. So that we're not dependent upon this organization or this foundation who gives us a grant. And if they stop giving us a grant, then we're going to shut down, and that is a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Right? And that happens so much in nonprofits. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why so many nonprofits have the grand opening and grand closing in the same year, right? We talk about independence. Why independence? Independence because of the restrictions that others could place, because also to avoid that mission creep so that we don't start getting into a situation where the mission is chasing the money instead of the other way around, right?
That's right.
The money coming towards the mission and aligning with what we're up to. Tell me, what are some of the top biggest mistakes that you see people make that makes their nonprofit not be sustainable? Can you hear me? We lost sound. Boo 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 boo. I can't hear you. So this is the fantastic thing about what I love about technology. The thing that I love about technology is it functions just like the nonprofit world. It really does, because it brings us so much goodness. It brings us so much information. And at the same time, it does not work like how we want it to always work in a perfect world. So when you're interacting with your nonprofit and you have something that falls apart, this is what sustainability is about. Sustainability is about the fact that we lost sound, but we're still able to go, right?
Keep the ball rolling.
We're still able to. That is what sustainability is. Go ahead, Doctor.
So what was the question again?
What are some of the 3 biggest mistakes, if you could think of 3, that people make that makes their nonprofit not be sustainable?
I think a heavy reliance upon one funding stream, right? So we talked about heavy reliance upon grants, and that typically is what funds nonprofits. And what I've learned is that
I lost sound again. Can you hear me? So one of the things that Dr. William Clark was just saying is kind of just reiterating that heavy reliance on one source for funding. I've seen that happen so many times where this particular foundation is donating, so let's say Real Coke is the foundation, and we always get our monies from them. And so then they decide to stop funding us and we're in a bad situation. So that's something to think about. And really, it's interesting because this is something to do not only in the nonprofit world, but the for-profit world. They just call it something different. They call it diversifying their portfolio.
Yep.
You know, or as my grandmother would say, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. It's one of those things that just kind of translate into different language, but it's one of the same age-old lessons when it comes to making mistakes. And Dr. Clark is saying that this is one of the biggest mistakes: reliance on
a single stream. And everybody, forgive me for jumping in and out. I am using my app on my phone, and people are calling at the same time. But funding is one issue. People focus on one funding stream. So I'm going to give this away for free. My book that's going to be coming up, and you can go to williambclark.com or elipatrick.com, which is under construction, and that's going to be our consulting website. All that will be available. But one of the things I'm going to talk about in my book and in my training is that there are 3 breakdowns of a financial budget. And Rasheem, I still have a little bit more to share, but let me just give these quick stats. Out of a single budget, 21% of a typical nonprofit budget comes from contributions, gifts, and grants. So that's kind of what we understand as the basics of funding for most nonprofits. 73% of a typical budget for a nonprofit comes from revenues from government fees and contracts. So not all nonprofits will qualify for contracts and services and fees from the government. Certain nonprofits do, such as housing institutions, shelter institutions, where they're being paid by the head to resolve a problem or meet a need. But here's the biggest opportunity, and I want people to get this stat and listen to it very closely. 6% of a nonprofit budget comes from other sources. Only 6%, Rasheen. And that 6% includes, and this is where we build this training on, it includes rental income, it includes special event income, and include gains and losses from goods sold. So that is where we're going to spend a lot of time with folks trying to figure out how can they increase that 6% to a higher percentage, because we believe, as I've worked with my church and others, that there's an opportunity to increase your independent revenue source so that you're not fully dependent upon the traditional sources such as grants or even government contracts and fees to keep the doors open and the lights on and bills paid.
Absolutely. Give us the link to the freebie once again. What is the W?
So my website is williampclark.com.
William P. Clark.
Yep. And the consulting website, which is still under construction, we're about 90% finished, is going to be elipatrick.com, and that is still under construction, so you probably won't see anything there. But by the time folks catch on to this video, we should be up and running. And shortly, we'll be publishing this book called Sustainability. There will be other downloadable freebies that they can download and access and view this information. But we feel like nonprofits need to have this information available, especially if you're between the ages of 2 to 5 years old. We want you to start to think about sustainability, which leads into the other 2 things I think, nonprofits, other 2 mistakes I think nonprofits make. The second mistake I think people make is that they have poor planning skills. And especially in the nonprofit space, I still haven't figured out why, nonprofits tend to have poor planning skills. But part of me feels like, it's based upon the good work that we're doing. And because it's good work, it feels good, it pulls at the heartstrings, people tend not to take it as seriously. So I wrote an article in 2012 about how to introduce strategic thinking to a nonprofit. And even at that time, when I wrote that article, there was an intentional focus on just the lack of discipline nonprofit leaders do not have. If you look at the boards of nonprofits, they're not disciplined. So they're not holding executive directors accountable. And I'm not advocating for a hard-nosed culture within any organization, but the lack of business skills in any organization, for-profit, nonprofit, can really be detrimental to the functionality of that particular business. The last thing I'll share in terms of a mistake that I see a lot is, and I'm going to say this, and it sounds like a familiar term, but I'm going to explain this, and it's no vision. So when I talk about no vision, I'm not necessarily talking about your view of the future. What I think about when I say no vision is that I think a lot of nonprofits have a great opportunity to design and create the future that they want. It's different from saying, I see myself doing A, B, and C. That's totally different than saying, you know what, I want to see X, Y, and Z happen. Because when you start to say, I am going to design my future and X, Y, and Z is going to happen, then as I backtrack into my planning, into my thinking, into my forecasting, I'm putting in place the steps I need to take to make that future a reality. This is where you start to get into control of your resources. You start to control the outcomes of your organization. You start to control your ability to sustain. And so nonprofits are beginning, if they take that mindset, are beginning to think more like a business. I am not going to let my lights turn off because this grant ran out. I am not going to wait till the last minute to apply for a grant, right? Or I'm not going to wait till the very last minute to let people know we have no more money and the grant ran out, because I'm creating this intentional future that is dependent upon my ability as an executive director to create our own resources. And our own resources are going to pay our overhead, and our grants are going to pay for programming, which is the intended outcome.
No, that's fantastic. I love that. So I don't know if you guys got that. Listen, RTD it. If you're a part of my community, you're familiar when I say RTD, that means write that down. Write that down. So here's what you need to write that down. This is an RTD moment. If you didn't catch it, Dr. Clark talked about the reliance. Right now I'm sharing the mistakes. So the reliance on one source of income. Also, he talked about the failure to plan, and even more specifically, the lack of business skills and discipline on a lot of the boards. And I think that's so key to highlight that, because I know a lot of new and emerging nonprofits, the first boards, we go through different phases of boards development. And usually if you're just trying to get the paperwork together, that first phase is what I call friends, families, and fools. That means whoever you could get sit in the room to agree. So sometimes it's your BFF, sometimes it's mama and them, and then you and mama and them having a falling out, and then so they're not coming to the board meetings, or they're just not committed, or they're only showing up because you are there, right? So that's usually the first level that nonprofits boards typically go through, and that's just because we're just trying to get the paperwork, we're just trying to get the status file. Then the second level that nonprofits typically go through is a board of just strictly subject matter experts, where if you are doing a youth development, you may have an educator on board, you may have a principal, you may have someone with the Department of Corrections for youth or something like that. And then there's that third level that I think is just like, your stuff don't stink too bad if you're at this level. And that's when you have a blend of subject matter experts as well as people who their network is their net worth. And that's definitely what you want to have. Thank you so much, Jose Ramirez, for subscribing to our channel. That's definitely what you want to have, because you want to have people who know their stuff, but you also want to have people connected. And that's part of that big mistake in terms of failure to plan, because when you developed your board, you didn't necessarily plan or think that out. You just collected people. And so we have to be cognizant of that. And I love what Dr. Clark also said about no vision, and really keying in on creating and designing your future. Right? Not just I can see this, or the world would be better if, but I'm actually going to actively create and design what the future is going to look like, and do that with a level of conviction. And I think sometimes they're able to do that more, Dr. Clark, I've seen, with some level of conviction, when they really feel like this is what they are supposed to do, when they really feel like this is what they are called to do. And I know that typically in the nonprofit arena, it's very much a risk adverse arena, and it's not particularly innovative. But I love what you said about the importance of creating and designing your future. I know people are probably going to be hopping out and hopping in. And if you're at this point in the recording, I just wanted to let you guys know that if you want this and more, please do visit bemorellc.com/real live to access the free 4 weeks of course content. And if you just want to hear more of this or more of Dr. Clark, you can catch him at williampclark.com. And you can get your goodies there. And he's also going to give us more information at the end on how we could stay in contact. But before we let him go, we want to know more information. So one of the things that I want to ask you about right now is, if I am a new or emerging nonprofit and I'm listening to you right now and I want my nonprofit to be sustainable, what are some things that I could do? What are like 3 to 5 things that I could do in the next 90 days to get my organization moving in a direction towards sustainability?
Well, I think, it's a process. Let me just be clear about that. It's a process. I think I'm hearing an echo.
Oh, I'll mute myself.
Okay, so it's a process. Can you still hear me? Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, the echo's back.
Maybe I should put on my earphones. Go ahead. I'll put on my earphones.
Okay. So for everybody that's listening, there is a process that you can take in the next 90 days. And in the book Sustainable that will be coming out, I share the 3 steps, the 3-legged stool that every nonprofit leader, executive director can go through to become a more sustainable nonprofit. Those 3 things is to develop good leadership, whether it's within yourself or amongst your team or amongst your board. Good leadership is so vital to any nonprofit success, whether it's sustainability, whether it's strategic planning and the other services our team offers, but leadership is so critical. In the book, we talk a lot about self-leadership and how vital it is to making a difference within a nonprofit sustainability efforts. The second thing you can do in your nonprofit is to encourage a culture or create a culture of innovation. Nonprofits, what we've observed, what we researched, what we've seen is that innovation in a nonprofit is more than likely connected to how a nonprofit is able to innovatively design programs for their customers. And while that's cool, and while that's appreciated, and while that does work in getting grants, innovation in that arena is very limiting because you're not really innovating in the real world. As I lead a small nonprofit now, I struggle with some of my partners to walk through the process of figuring out how to be more innovative in a real world application, because what we design and what our partners design typically is created in a petri dish, right? It doesn't really work in the real world. It's not inclusive of real world scenarios. And sometimes I wonder if nonprofits think that they are able or they're capable of meeting the needs of all people and almost playing God. And the reality is you can't. You're not created here to be God, right? You're not here to be everybody's end all and be all. You're here to meet a specific need in the community that you're passionate about. So I want you to start to think about ways to be innovative in other arenas, such as relative to this content, your sustainability. How do you become sustainable? What ideas should you explore to become sustainable? What makes the most sense for sustainability? And of course, you can contact us and we can help your team walk through that process. But innovation is so vital. Without innovation, the conversation me and my team will have with you won't go anywhere at all. So you got to create a culture of innovation. The very last thing, and this, depending on the choice that you make, may not happen in 90 days. So I don't want anybody to leave this broadcast feeling like this is something you can do really, really quickly. In some cases you can. But the third step is to begin the process of creating renewable resources. Renewable resources, as I'm defining it in the book, are resources that are coming back to you over and over again, like an investment, right? You're not really working hard for it, but it's passive income that continues to replenish your coffers every month, every week, every 6 months, whatever the payment schedule is. Renewable resources is not the same as a grant that has a 3-year contract term or a 2-year contract term. It's going to pay you out every 6 months if you have a favorable report that you're submitting to them. And again, as we talked about a little earlier, some of those reports, may not be based in real world scenarios, right? You're creating, in some cases, fluff to make yourself look good, to make your funder happy, and to see if you can renew resources for the next funding year. But what we're talking about is renewable resources that are independent of those burdens that are created by philanthropic organizations. And they mean well, right? They come from a very good place. But as a nonprofit who's concerned about a core mission that serves people or serves the community, that can become a burden that you can't handle. And this is why when you think about a market where there's 1.5 million nonprofits in this country, that's why some small nonprofits do not get resources. This is why in some cases folks aren't getting the grant awards that they're looking for, because they're not capable. They don't have the capacity to meet the needs, the stringent needs that are defined by funders. So in a case like that, this is where you might want to consider looking at renewable resources. So again, it's leadership, it's innovation, and renewable resources. And this is what we're talking about in sustainability.
Fantastic. So I love what you said about not only just about leadership, but about self-leadership. I think that is so key, because leadership, of course, drives the organization. And what I see so often happen, really think about this when you're looking into leadership. What I see so often happen is leaders hire, promote, engage with weaker versions of who they are, right? This person is like me, but I can control them. They don't get too out of hand. So I'm going to hire, promote, and put up this person who's just like me, but weaker version of who I am, instead of promoting, connecting, and engaging with stronger versions of who we are not.
Yep.
Because one of the real actual threats that is present in the nonprofit world, as opposed to the for-profit world, your board could actually potentially fire you. They do have that power. They do have that leverage. So I think sometimes that weighs in the back of people's minds in terms of who they get on boards, who they elect on boards, and how they engage. But if we are all there about the mission, one thing that is, thank you so much for subscribing, Jonathan. One of the things that is so important is to make sure that you are hiring stronger versions of who you are not, instead of weaker versions of who you are. Leadership is so key, because that is key. And I'm so glad he said that first about leadership. And then he said creating a culture of innovation, because, you really can't create a culture of innovation if the leadership is resistant to change. If the leadership is resistant to change, if they don't want to try the new program, if they don't want to go online, if they don't want to tweet, if they don't want to, all of those things, it's going to be hard, and it's going to be a battle. And finally, he made a point of make things for real life application. There are so many things that sound really good. And I know what sounds good in a book, because I have my master's in nonprofit management. There are so many things that sound good in my textbooks that when I get it out in the real world, it's just like, Or maybe it is good, but we just got to tweak it, because nonprofits are not one size fits all, right? Even what you're going to get from Dr. Clark and I is not going to be one size fits all. So you have to be able to take it, apply it, and mold it. And that's why also some of the things that we're giving you, some of them may sound general, but they're general because we know one size does not fit all. Right? Mm-hmm. What worked for my youth organization may not necessarily work for my pet rescue organization. So that is so key and so good. Tell us one more time how we can get in contact with you, how we can virtually stalk you on Twitter or Facebook or wherever else you hang out digitally.
Yeah, so Twitter or Facebook, you can find me at drwilliampclark.com. Twitter is probably a better place to catch me. You can find some of my leadership conversation shows, some of which Rasheem has been a part of, and you can see what's going on there. You can go to my website, williampclark.com. That website is primarily a product page of books that we have available right now. If you read the description, this is a little secret. It tells you how to get your free copy of any of the books that's on the website. Right now, we are also in the development of my new website for Eli Patrick. Eli Patrick is our consulting company to churches and nonprofits. It's an exciting project. I'm actually looking at the test site right now, and it looks really good, if I say so myself. But I can't wait to release that into the world and be a resource to folks who need help, who are looking for answers, and want to dialogue about how to sustain their nonprofits.
Thank you so much. Thank you also for joining us, Hatrick, everyone who had an opportunity to jump in and jump out throughout the entire process. Hatrick, if you have a question that you'd like to pose to Dr. Clark, go ahead and write it in the live chat and we'll ask him while we have him on. Everyone, I want to thank you also for listening to all of these good tips and tools. What he shared with us, just to give a little bit of a recap, is he shared with us some of the 3 biggest mistakes. He shared with us the definition, meaning, and how to shape sustainability, how to make your organization more sustainable. Some of the things that you can actually start doing today. He let us know it's a process, and these processes are bit by bit by bit by bit, but you can start working on some of those bits right now to kind of break it down. He also shared with us a free resource. If you go check out williampclark.com, it's actually a product page, but he gave us a secret way that we could get the books for free. So you have to be paying attention, listening really hard. And he also let us know, basically gave us kind of like a premiere that he actually has another site that's coming up and we should go check it out. So everybody doesn't know about it.
Rashim, I'm going to give you the secret URL once we get offline so you can see it.
I like secrets.
You know, here's a little secret I tell people. I'll tell folks, you know, and Rashim, we got to do this again. You might have seen this show too. You can't be cheap as a nonprofit. A nonprofit doesn't mean cheap and less than. And Rashim, when you look at this this site, you know, I'm proud of it because I didn't do it. I didn't design it. I paid for it. I paid somebody to do it, and they've been more than awesome to me. Once it goes live, I will more than sing their praises because they are worth the money. But yeah, you just can't be cheap if you're going to do your nonprofit right. So I'll share that with you after.
Absolutely. I love that, Dr. Clark, because one of the things that I tell people all the time, just because you're a nonprofit, there's no reason not to make one. Because you're going to need it.
Right.
You are going to need it. Yes, the mission is first, but you're going to need money to support that mission. Thank you again so much for sharing your time, your talent, your treasures with us, and all of your secrets. I like secrets and gifts and stuff. Yep. So thank you for that. And thank you for everyone who is listening live and everyone who's watching the replay. Until next time, continue to do more, serve more, and be more.
Bye.